What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Brujo 101. I'm Martin Moreno, and I'm joined with my lovely co-host, as always, Thanya, a.k.a. Ashe, a.k.a. the Galactic Spiritual Advisor that transcends our plane.
Here we go.
And what else do you transcend?
That's a lot of pressure.
How you doing, Thanya?
I'm good. Hi, everybody.
And we're joined tonight with by Craig Owens, who is just a fascinating human being. I just met you a few minutes ago, Craig, and already I am super intrigued by your line of work, by your the stuff that you do in life, dude. I mean, when do you meet a paranormal haunted historian and an author and a photographer?
Yeah, I do it all. I wear many hats, but this is the one I wear the most, and it's getting pretty worn out. Yeah. Thank you. There really isn't too many people that do everything, do it all.
Mm-hmm.
But it all started kind of strange because I had a film degree.
Okay.
So that's where my passion for photography took off, and I actually worked for a short bit, 4 years, for the International Cinematographers Guild. I actually had worked in production, film and TV production in the 1990s, but it was while I was at the guild that I started really missing photography and wanting to get back into it. So I saved up a little nest egg, and then I left, and I wanted to do this old Hollywood type project because I always loved the old Hollywood atmosphere, what buildings that we had left. At one point, I lived practically across the street from the Ambassador Hotel on Grocer Boulevard. Heard about the ghost stories there. Always was fascinated with the ghost side all my life, but the combination of how it all kind of came together was actually almost an accident. It was not deliberate. And what ended up happening is, as soon as I left Local 600, where I worked for 4 years, I wanted to shoot an old Hollywood type photo shoot, and I was looking for a hotel, one with what I call good bones, a lot of that old 1920s, 19-teens architecture. So I was looking at a number of hotels in Southern California, and I ended up picking the Mission Inn.
Where's the Mission Inn?
Riverside.
Oh,
California.
yes. The one that they deck it all out for Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it takes up a whole city block.
Yes.
It's huge, has different styles, so you can do different things with it. And this was in August, so it was a slow time of the year. Riverside, it was over 100
I was going to say it had to have been an oven over there.
It was really hot. And I found a model who was willing to go out there and model some 1920s clothing. Went and purchased a bunch of stuff off of different sites, made sure that they fit, and we went there for 2-3 days in August, and just to shoot, just a 1920s themed photo shoot. That was it, just one person and then me. And so we checked in, and everything was fine for only a few hours before weird stuff started happening.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
And it came as now. Let me just back up and say I knew that the Mission Inn was supposedly haunted.
Let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Before this trip to the Mission Inn, were you a believer in hauntings? Were you a skeptic? Were you one of those doubting Thomas type of personalities? Where did you stand on the subject?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I wanted to believe. I had a few experiences that I couldn't quite explain.
Paranormal experiences?
Right, but I was also very much a skeptic and wanted to really have a real experience where I cannot try to use my rational mind to come up with some excuse to, write it off.
Sure.
I wanted to have like a real ghost experience, not just something that I think might be a ghost or something really weird happen that no one will believe me. So I've had a few of those where I figured out after the fact that it had to have been a ghost, but it was very rare in my life, and I'd never seen a ghost, and I'd always wanted to see one, but I was already pushing 40, and I was thinking, oh, if I haven't seen a ghost by now, I'm never going to see one. So
I like how there's a timeline. He's like, probably not going to happen.
Yeah. I was of the opinion that maybe only certain people are wired to see ghosts.
Sure.
And that
crazy
I just
people
didn't have that
Nice,
wire.
Thanks, Martin.
I said crazy people.
I'm like, thanks, Martin.
I'm joking. So now you check into the spot, and you said that within a few hours you start experiencing things. Now, they told you this place was haunted?
Well, the Mission Inn has a weird policy even to this day. Now, the ghost stories go back over 100 years.
Okay.
But I didn't know that at the time.
I wasn't aware.
And they have this weird policy not to really talk about it, but it's like the worst kept secret in Riverside. Everyone has stories.
Oh, wow.
And families of families have stories. And even some of the relatives of the owners had contacted me later and said that the owners have stories.
Oh, wow.
But they put the word out not to officially talk about it. So when you ask staff, various employees, sometimes you'll get an honest answer, but a lot of time you'll get some hemming and hawing. And the Dawsons that lead the historical tours, my understanding is that they're instructed not to admit to it whatsoever. And I have had a few just flat out deny that it's haunted, but I also know that that is what they're told to say.
Okay.
So when I checked in, I knew that it was supposed to be haunted, so I did take a couple of audio recorders with me, just in case.
Okay.
But I wasn't there to ghost hunt. I was actually there to do a regular photo shoot. So I set up the camera. We do some shooting in a room that's called the Carrie Jacobs Bond Suite. It's on the very top floor of the Mission Inn, and it's a now I know the history of the building. I didn't know it then, but it was completed around 1928-29, and it was originally not supposed to be. It's now a guest suite, like $1,000 or more a night. But back then, it was what I found out later was a women's meeting room.
Okay.
For cards and special events. There'd be some weddings that took place there, but it wasn't converted into a guest room until around the 80s or 1990s, and it's been that way ever since.
So it's large.
It's 2 stories. There's a loft, and then there's the main room. So it is pretty large. That's why they call it the suite. So I was there. We did some shooting till like 4 a.m. I was so tired. The model had the room directly below me, so she went downstairs and crashed. And I fell asleep with my clothes on. I was that tired. You know, driving from L.A., having a big dinner, and then immediately going into a photo shoot till the wee hours of the morning. So nothing happened during that point in time, but I woke up a few hours later, ran some errands, and the first thing that happened around noon inside that suite. It wasn't at night. It was actually
daytime
at noontime. And I had just come back from the bank, and I saw a housekeeping cart somewhat close to the outside of my suite. So I opened the door, and I hear someone moving things around in the bathroom.
Now this is a big suite, so it's like okay.
So I thought it was housekeeping. So I said, "I'm here." No answer. So I go into the bathroom, and nothing's there. Nobody's there. Nothing had been moved around that I could see. And so I thought, I must be crazy from the heat.
Okay.
You know, it was 100 degrees already at noon. So the model was still crashed. I did not want to wake her up. And so I just jumped on my little laptop and started sending out emails and checking, whatever, just doing busy work until the model woke up. And that's when more weird things happened. And what ended up happening was there's this upstairs loft with just a table on a tile floor. And that's all that's up there, maybe a chair. And I started hearing the sound, what sounded like a coin being dropped one by one on some kind of wooden surface. And it sounded kind of metallic, but I wasn't sure whether it was not like a quarter. It was more like $1 or a $50.
A heavier piece than a quarter.
And I still ignored the sound. I was just still, because I have to be focused on one thing and one thing only. So I'm typing and just ignoring it. Then I started hearing the clack, clack, clack of women's heels on the tile floor, and it sounded like it was beginning to come down the stairs, which was right behind me where I was sitting. I had my back to the stairs. That's when I quickly wrote, I think I've got a ghost. I've got to go check it out. Talk to you later. Send. And I grabbed my audio recorder and I went upstairs. I went around and made sure that no one was around.
Look at this. I've got chills right here.
I see them.
Mostly because you're a fascinating storyteller. You're painting a very vivid picture. You've described this place in incredible detail, which it's fascinating. Thank you. That's a talent that you have there. I could picture this whole thing going down. Now, me personally, I don't know that I would have had the balls to walk up those stairs. I might have just been like, okay, I'm gonna get the hell out of here right now. Like, I don't know, and I'm not. I'm one of those skeptics. I'm a skeptic, but I walk in. There's a sound. There's nothing there. I can dismiss it. It's the heat. I'm tired. No big deal. Then I'm hearing this clack, 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 and now I'm hearing heels. That's a lot of quote unquote coincidences.
That was 3 things within 30 minutes.
But
That's
he wanted,
a lot.
he wanted,
That is a lot.
he wanted to have an experience, so he was open to it. So he wasn't going to leave, because you were saying that you had thought maybe that time had passed, but then you went. So he wanted to have an experience too.
No, and I'm giving him
Like,
props because
yeah,
I don't
you
know
would've
that
left?
I think I might have left. And I'm one of those like, oh, I'm gonna go check it out. Like I remember well, I'm not gonna get into it
The
right now.
woman's heels would have probably freaked me out more than anything else.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because I've heard things like that, and the sound, it bothers me. Like, it doesn't bother me, it scares me, I guess. So
It doesn't bother me as much now, because not that I hear it a lot.
yeah.
It's exciting. It does get the adrenaline going and the
Sure.
blood pumping, and it certainly did at that point. I poked my head outside to make sure no one was punking me. No one was around. But this was around 2009.
Okay.
When this happened. So the recession was still taking its toll, and we practically had the mission into ourselves. There were more staff than there were guests.
And you wanted to replicate a late 20s, so that's interesting that the recession had just happened, and not to get sidetracked here, but we're talking about the roaring 20s, right before the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Which is like, when like 08, 09 was very close to the Depression, so
You're
that's,
right.
so that timing is pretty fascinating to me.
Well, I never even put it in that perspective, but yeah, that is correct. That's absolutely correct.
That's my favorite time period, the 1920s.
The roaring 20s?
Yeah, like I think if I believed in like reincarnation the way some people do, I really hope that was me back then.
So okay, sorry, we keep interrupting
No,
you
that's
here.
fine.
Go ahead.
That's fine. No, I want to join and just go right off the curve and go, hey, I like the 19-teens. I started out liking the 1920s.
I love the 80s.
But then I grew 19-teens. But and now it's like I'm starting to play around with Edwardian and Victorian era stuff.
Oh, that is cool.
But yeah, back to the story. After checking, making sure that the environment was as controlled as possible, I did go upstairs and I turned on the recorder, and I did a exactly 10-minute question and answer just upstairs. And I never done this before, so I was listening very intently, and I didn't hear anything. In fact, I felt foolish after 10 minutes.
Give me an example of the questions you were asking.
Oh, if you're here, can you come forward? Thought I heard you talking. Can I get a name? And you give it a pause.
Mm-hmm.
Then you ask the next question. And so after a while, after 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
of talking to air,
Mm-hmm.
you start kind of running out of questions and go,
Mhm.
there's nothing here, So I turned it off, but I did turn the recorder on and start playing. And sure enough,
Oh.
there was a female voice.
Oh, that is just great.
And I didn't have headphones because I wasn't there to ghost hunt. It was just something I just threw in my bag at the last second. I'm glad I did, but it wasn't anything that I was conscientious. I wasn't going to ghost hunt. It was just only if something weird happened would I break it out. Something weird happened, I broke it out. And so I didn't have headphones, so I couldn't hear what it was. But I was playing that recorder to anybody that wanted to hear it over the next 2-3 days.
What did you hear in the recorder?
Think? It was just. Now, when I got back home,
Yeah.
I have Adobe system, and I have speakers, and I can tweak. And I have headphones, and I can listen to what it was, what might be there, and I was able to make out some of it. And when I had asked, do you want to come close to me so we can talk? It really sounds like a female saying, sure, I would love that.
Oh, shit.
Oh, heck no.
And then she says something.
I said, oh, heck no.
Then she says something unintelligible, and then she says, and it has kind of an accent, like from another part of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I want to go home. And that kind of broke my heart and gave me the chills at the same time. I want to go home.
You can hear that in this
Yes,
recording.
very faint. It was very faint, but it was there.
Dude. Okay.
And that freaked me out. I'm glad I didn't know what was being said during the 3-4 days. But there was something else profound that happened at the Mission Inn. And that one sent me home and had me sleeping with the lights on for 10 days. I did see my first ghost. And that was in a different part of that 4th floor. And what I had done is I'd shot in this beautiful suite with Gothic arches inside and columns, and I wanted to move to another suite where I could get just a different background. So I picked the most popular old suite at the Mission Inn, which is the Alhambra Mirador suite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the movie stars stayed. That's where VIP stayed up until more recently when they built a special hideaway that's all modern for like Schwarzenegger and President George W. Bush when he came, and Barbara Streisand. They would stay. There's now a hidden luxury place where they stay. But prior to all of that, in the old days, in the old country, it was the Alhambra Mirador.
Okay.
And so I was in that suite. And let me tell you, I did not like being in there. From the moment I checked in, I was thinking, I must be either really tired after doing 3-day photo shoot, but I can't stand the atmosphere in this place. I do not like being alone in this room. And the model didn't seem to have a problem, but I had a problem. And no matter how I lit that room, it felt like there was never enough light. It's like whatever light I put up, it just seemed to be diffused and absorbed. And so I never could get the lighting. So I was getting increasingly frustrating. There were a couple of odd sounds that happened that I couldn't quite explain. And then finally about midnight, my phone rang. It was my wife, so I go take the call, and so it's like break time. And so I'm talking to her, and she's in Europe with the family, with the kids, and I'm talking to her, and I don't want to get off the phone with her. She goes, it's a long distance charge, we should get off the phone. I go, can we please just keep talking? I mean, I'm really not feeling well about being here. So no, could not extend the conversation. So as I'm walking across an outdoor courtyard back to the Mirador to finish the shoot, I see something that catches my eye off to the side. And so I look, and what's there is an open mouth brick hallway.
Okay.
It looks like a dungeon. It's round and it's lined with bricks with a few lights down the hallway. And if you look down that hallway, on the far end of it, it's not a long hallway, just a short one. There is a glass door. Once you walk through the glass door, you are technically inside the Mission Inn.
Okay.
So, but there's little alcoves in this brick dungeon-like outdoor.
Sure.
And it's on the top floor. So everything's weird about the Mission Inn and its architecture. So I'm looking and I'm going, what is causing me to, what got my attention?
What's drawing you there?
Yeah, and so I'm looking for a ghost. I don't see one. I mean, I'm kind of looking for like Ghostbusters type of ghosts, green blobs or blue see-through things. I'm not seeing any of that, but I'm taking as a photographer, I'm taking inventory of everything that I see. The bricks calls from the lights on the bricks, and they're casting weird shadows, striped shadows from the bricks. And then I see what looks like a shadow on the right. And so I go, okay, let me do it one more time, and I'm looking and, checking everything. But then I start honing in on that shadow on the right and going, it looks almost human-like. Looks like a robed, something cowled, wearing a cowl like a Franciscan habit.
Okay.
And it's short, about 5'1", but it looks like it's leaning out from behind a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that it looks blacker than black. But it looks two-dimensional. Blacker than black, looks blacker than the other shadows cast on the bricks. And just as I was thinking, where's the light source that's casting the shadow? As soon as I thought that shadow went zip around the corner.
It moved.
It moved like very fast, but human-like. Like as if someone were like leaning over, it moved up like an arc.
Yeah.
Out of sight. I was like a deer in headlight when I saw that, and then the voice inside of me said, "Dummy, go check it out." And so I did. I went down that little alcove where it disappeared, and it reminds me of that Greek myth about the Minotaur, where they're in a Colosseum, and the hero has to pick a door. One is a safe bet, and the other one has this ferocious monster behind it. There's only two doors, and so I don't know where that shadow disappeared to, but one of them, it turns out later, through research, is considered the most haunted suite at the Mission Inn. The other door, unfortunately, led to the bedroom where I was going to be sleeping that night.
Oh, heck no.
So I went back in looking like I had just seen a ghost, because I had, and I was nervous. Nothing still was going right. There were footsteps that both of us kept hearing on the roof, but there's nothing above us except a tile roof. So after we tried to record that, but by the time we got the recorder set up, it had stopped. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe it's our imagination. I don't know. But the next morning, a door slams, wakes me up at 7 in the morning, somewhere in that vicinity of where my suite was. Someone slammed a door. So I couldn't go back to sleep, so I got up, packed up my things, and as I was checking out, I said, "Can you just tell me if anyone else was around on that top floor besides me?" And so they looked on their register and they go, "No, Mr. Owens, looks like you had the whole entire floor to yourself." And I said, "Well, I woke up to a door slam and about 7. So are you sure?" And said, "Well, let's check." And so she checked and said, No, no one was in any of the suites, so I don't know who could have slammed the door, said, we have housekeeping that comes in, but housekeeping had not checked in and had not gone to those rooms at that hour. So I went, okay, thank you very much. I paid the bill.
I'm going home.
And I went home, and I slept with the light on, and I was writing everyone I knew, what is a shadow person? What is a shadow person? And I looked it up online, and the little illustration that they had on Wikipedia was very similar to what I had seen, except I never saw glowing eyes or anything like that. It was just a two-dimensional blacker than black shadow. Now, I did not believe in shadow figures at that time. So it took a while for me to process and accept the idea that shadow figures do exist.
But that hotel, what was the history of that hotel besides it being a hotel? What was it? Because it sounds like it sounds like a monk, right? Like a Franciscan monk.
I was gonna touch on that.
Yeah.
And now before we get there, let me backtrack a little bit. The model, was she privy to any noises, to any visions?
Yes.
Was it just you?
She actually had her own experience.
Okay.
And I'm glad you asked, because sometimes I don't have time to tell that story.
No, please do.
But the day I recorded the audio, about 2 in the afternoon, I couldn't wait for her to get up, you know, but around 2:30 in the afternoon, she finally comes back upstairs, and so I can't wait to tell her what happened, because I'll be honest with you, after that first thing happened, my mind's on ghosts for the next 3-4 days. I mean, it was unsettling, it was exciting, my adrenaline was going. So I played this audio recording for her, and she said, I hear that too. It said, by the way, were you moving furniture at 5 in the morning? And I went, no. It was like sound asleep. And she said, I had just gotten downstairs and was just on the verge of falling asleep. And I hear this heavy dragging sound coming from your suite right above me. And she said, it was really distracting, but I thought you were just setting up for the next day's shoot. So she just went ahead and fell asleep. And I was like, no, I was probably asleep by the time you even got to your room. And it's like, I would not have been moving furniture at 5 in the morning. I literally crashed. When we told that story to the front desk clerk, who was really nice, and she heard the audio as well, she said, oh, she really perked up when I told her about the dragging sound. And she said, so were you up? Were you up moving furniture around? I said, no, I was asleep. And she said, oh, well, that's good to know, because since I've been working here, that's the 3rd time I've heard that story about the same room from other people. Shit. And she says that the people below would call and say, can you tell the neighbors to stop dragging things around and moving the furniture upstairs?
That's crazy.
And she was afraid to call. So she'd go, okay, well, we'll look into it. And she was afraid to call, because if she wakes up those people,
yeah, 5 a.m.
Go, what do you mean? We're not doing anything. And then they'll want an explanation, and then it gets very difficult.
Yeah, if I'm paying $1,000 a night and you call me at freaking 5 a.m. If I'm paying $1,000 and I want to move furniture at 5 a.m., I'm moving furniture at 5 a.m.
Well, I will tell you that furniture is very weighted and heavy. And they do that deliberately, because at one point I did try to move the furniture, and it's extremely difficult. You have to really want to move the furniture to move the furniture. I think they've got like sandbags or bean bags or something stuffed inside, and a lot of hotels do that with their.
Yeah, because they don't want, even though you do pay $1,000, they don't want you moving.
They don't want you moving, so a lot of that stuff is weighted
Martin
down
thinks
anyway.
he's Motley Crue.
So at the risk of sounding like Jen Psaki here, let's circle back to your thing about the monk.
Sure.
The Mission Inn I don't know this for a fact, but based on the architecture and the name, I'm gonna guess that it was a mission at one point. Now there's missions up and down Southern California. All through the coast of California, we've had the San Fernando mission, the Santa Barbara mission, the San Juan Capistrano mission, and the Mission Inn. Why would that not be a mission as well? And so if it was a mission, it's when when they were Catholicizing the savages, for lack of a better word, the Native Americans. Okay, I call them savages because that's what John Wayne called them. And so they would set up camp, and then they would preach the gospel to the locals. And so the fact that you said he looked like a monk, immediately my head went to this was a mission where probably lots of the natives were beat if they didn't believe, just like that's what the conquistadores did, right? When they were out there evangelizing.
Yes, but let me point out the Mission Inn history is complex.
Sure.
But it never was a mission.
Never was a mission.
I didn't think so. I've been there for brunch.
It was a fake mission meant to emulate California missions. And I could give you a simplified story of it.
Sure.
Because it gets really complicated. But basically, Riverside was a fairly new town when it was built established in the late 1870s, 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was part of San Bernardino County at that point. And San Bernardino, of course, has a mission.
And then that would be San Bernardino.
Right. And at some point, there was big friction between Riverside and the city of San Bernardino. One was too conservative, the other one was too liberal, even back then. Mm-hmm. So it caused great divisiveness, so much so that Riverside seceded, and they finally got their appeal and became their own county, Riverside County. Well, what do you do with Riverside County? Well, Riverside's main income was agriculture and oranges. Mm-hmm. And although it did have a Native American indigenous history there, it was largely whitewashed, and there wasn't a lot of traces of it around. Now, other parts of Riverside County definitely was heavy. Temecula in that area.
Well, then you go up to Arrowhead.
And then you had reservations all around, but Riverside itself was very white.
Okay.
And and there was one person there named Frank Miller, and he ended up building the Mission Inn as a tourist attraction.
Wow.
But he was trying to, Spanish. There was a book called Ramona that had come out, Helen Hunt Jackson, in the late 19th century. It was a huge hit, bestseller. It sparked a whole romanticized view of Spanish California. And so you had a lot of architecture popping up. It was featured in a World Fair that's specifically celebrated this style of architecture. So this seed got planted in Frank Miller's head, where he wants to have this. Now, his family had built a hotel on the site of what would later become the Mission Inn, and it was the nicest hotel there. It was upscale, but by comparison of what he ended up building, it was a small boarding house.
Sure.
By comparison. So he kept trying to raise money, and he would almost get there, but the other people in Riverside would say, "Why do you want to build a mission? We don't have an indigenous history here. There were no Spanish here. We just want oranges." But he was the one that helped Riverside to secede from San Bernardino.
So,
and he made a deal with the Huntingtons, the wealthy Huntingtons who operated the railroad. So that was all between those two. That was that group that was cooking it up. But the Huntingtons ended up funding for the original building of the Mission Inn, and they saw it as a way to bring tourists to Riverside. And it went to Frank Miller's head. He completely wanted people to get fooled that it was a Spanish mission.
I could have sworn it. He fooled me. He fooled me because when I went, I'm sitting here like, and that's why I said I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it was a mission back in the day.
Even before the Mission Inn was built, he was the one that manipulated a indigenous school to move from a reservation to Riverside.
Oh wow!
It was called the Sherman Institute back then. There's a lot that's been written about that place and the mistreatment of children, and how they were pretty much pressed into labor, cheap labor in these orange groves, and there's a lot of criticism toward Frank Miller as to how he tended to view indigenous people as props and set dressing more than humans. Now, you'll have people on the Frank Miller side that said, no, he really wasn't like that, but then you've got others that say, well, there are some examples.
I mean, and also it's not to justify it or make excuses for it, but at the time, I mean, you were talking about old Hollywood. That's what old Hollywood did with the natives as well. They were literally props for everything. And, Walt Disney did the same thing. And,
they did mission plays, and for a while there, Frank Miller did dress in a Franciscan habit.
Interesting.
Oh, that's where the Franciscan habit comes from.
That's where I'm going. I mean, it's a long, complicated story.
No, that makes sense.
Lots of rabbit holes, as we talked about before we started talking. Fell through lots of rabbit holes to come up with all of that. And but yeah, he did that for a while.
He was little.
Who?
The Frank.
No, he was in his 20s.
No. As far as his
stature, he was small, like the person.
I don't know. I mean, I can't remember. He was more like 5'10" or so. But I have another theory about the shadow figures and why they're shaped the way they are.
Okay.
Because other places have seen shadow figures, and sometimes they're described as wearing a cowl as well. Sometimes they're described as wearing a hat, like a hat. And that one is particularly called the Hat Man. And I've even heard of tales where they're shaped like a stingray, and various shapes.
Like the fish, the stingray, the fish, like that.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Just gliding flat.
Okay.
And would glide and disappear. But most of them are somewhat human shaped. Sometimes they're tall, sometimes they're short. I actually believe that through just listening and gathering stories, I have no way of really proving this. It's just, it fits a pattern. I think it's a certain form of apparition. A scale, if you were to scale ghosts on how they manifest themselves, there's a very low end, there's a very high end. The very low end is maybe a mist or a fog, something that looks smoky, has no shape whatsoever. The very opposite end, the very high end, is someone solid, just like you or me, where they actually look like they have mass and take on mass. You cannot see through them. They are solid, and they can maintain that for not very long, but they can maintain it for just a little bit. In the middle is where the shadow figures are. And that's when they start taking on mass. They start taking shape, as I really should say, because I don't think they take mass, shadows. But they start taking a human-like shape. And so when I say it's kind of blocky and human-like, but looks like it's wearing some kind of baggy Franciscan garment, it may be just it trying to take some kind of
So it's
shape.
like you believe it's almost like an evolution.
Yes.
It's like an evolution.
Yes.
You start off no shape at all, and then you slowly develop to the point where you're recognizable, and you can maybe be solid as an apparition for a little bit, and then it leaves.
Yeah. So I think it's like a mid-level manifestation. It hasn't manifested to full apparition, but it's certainly more manifested than smoke and wispy, vapory look thing. And that's my best explanation. And what's kind of interesting is I've run into other paranormal people, and we'd get talking about this, and they would tell me that they had reached the same conclusion too. So it's nice to know that I'm not alone in thinking this. But there are plenty of shadow figures that are seen that seem to be, that move and are seen like walking through walls that, or walking through walls where doors used to exist.
Okay.
So it leans towards the idea that it is a type of ghost and not, say, an extraterrestrial being, a dimensional figure that was never human to begin with, Native American spirit. All of these are possible, but I think it's more closer to just another style of ghost.
Now, when you went there, you went for a photo shoot. You're trying to do this 1920s photo shoot. You have no intention of hunting for ghosts.
Right.
Is this when all of a sudden now you leave here, and I'm imagining your search history must be just littered with, I'm telling you, your internet search history after you leave there is probably just, what are you Googling? What are you doing? What are you reading? What are you asking? What kind of like research or do you just chalk it up and say whatever, and then that doesn't start until later on?
That didn't start till later on. I mean, I wanted to know what the answers were, because I wanted to know, why are these places haunted? What was with the Carrie Jacobs Bond suite? Because I never read anything online about that particular suite being haunted. And yet I had experiences there. Was it always a guest suite? If so, who died there? You know, did anyone die there? You know, you start asking these kind of questions. Mm-hmm. And then I did another vintage 1920s style photo shoot at another hotel, the Pierpont Inn in Ventura. Other things broke out there. And so after talking it over with people, they're saying maybe it's what you're doing with the photos and staging these vintage style things, that you are actually stirring it up.
Did anything show up on the photos, by the way?
No, not on those. I did catch a ghost photo in Temecula once I started doing this full time, and it's just only one time, and I don't post it on social media. I've had lots of people, different people, look at it, professional photographers, photographer friends from Local 600, other paranormal people, and they all see what I see, that it's human light, but impossible for it to be human. But it also looks too good to be true, and I don't want to post it in a way that people will steal it, put their own story behind it, and or attack me as faking it, and based on information that they don't have. But I've kept the information very close. What the f-stop was, what the shutter speed was, what time of day the photo was taken. I've kept the original photo file very clean, so that if anyone takes it and tries to run it through these apps that look for photoshopping, that it always comes out either inconclusive or negative.
Gotcha.
Most of them are rigged to say inconclusive, and that's its way of saying we couldn't find anything. Any Photoshop.
So now you said you go back to your normal life. It's like one off, blah blah blah. You're doing your thing. Now you set up another photo shoot. You're in Ventura, and now
it was mostly footsteps walking all over in this empty building.
High heels again, or
it was more of male footsteps this time, and a couple of voices, and that were picked up that weren't ours. And again, this was in a building that we had absolute control over. No one else had access to it except staff, and we went to them the next day, and you can look, everything's key cards, so they can look and see who entered, and no one entered. Yet we have off and on sporadic, in which we actually did record footsteps going all over that place.
So you said, wait, so it wasn't you? You weren't the only one hearing this.
I didn't hear it at all. I was staying in another building, but I had my hair and makeup person stay alone in this house, and she heard it, and she told me, and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't believe it until I listened to the audio, and I went,
wow.
I owe you an apology. It's like I had my doubts that you had heard anything, and you heard a lot. And it's a matter. I'm surprised you got any sleep at all, because it was off and on, not just for a few minutes, but it was off and on for hours.
And it's always with the photo shoots.
Usually, yeah. So I started doing the photo shoots in earnest, and that's how I spent my nest egg that I had saved up. And I did 16 hotels, and 8 of them made volume 1. And yeah, we ran tests with every single one of them, and with the exception of 1, maybe 2 hotels, we caught something. There was only 1 hotel that I know of. I don't think there was anything haunted there. We didn't catch a darn thing. But with everything, with the others, yeah, we usually caught not just a little bit, but sometimes quite a bit.
And at what point do you decide, I'm going to write a book?
It wasn't too long after that, but that's when I decided that if I'm going to write a book, I want to write the kind of book that I've always wanted to see someone else write, one that actually doesn't fudge names, fudge dates, fudge locations, one that actually holds people accountable for what they say, including the author itself. Instead of using vague terms like old timers will tell you, or some people say,
legend says.
I wanted to just stay away from all of that. It's like by asking, what old timers are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean some people say?
Studies show.
What people
Once upon a
say?
time.
Who says? Or are you just making this up?
Okay.
So I took 7 years of research and following through rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. But I wanted to write the very definitive Bible of these haunted locations. And I ended up finding things that actually changed the history. I mean, I was correcting historians, but I was also fact-checking the paranormal claims, because a lot of them you can actually determine when they started, sometimes, who started them, and why. And usually, if you want to know if the ghost story is correct or not, the smoking gun is usually in the newspapers when they first started circulating the stories, because they'll give a name of the person and you look them up and you go, okay, they have a whole history of making things up. or the history is completely wrong.
Okay.
They'll say, oh, there was old timers for years have said that the 3rd floor of the Glen Tavern Inn was a bordello or speakeasy, and then you find out that no, it first popped into the news in 1986 as a marketing tool to promote their hauntings.
Of course, people because people are fascinated by it. If your place is haunted, people are going to want to come stay. They're going to want to come visit.
Yeah,
so it's a
sure.
great marketing.
No, I'm not anti-marketing at all. It's actually helped a lot of hotels and places actually stay solvent. It's just there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it.
Do you have a favorite hotel? Do you have a place where you're like, oh, this hotel's really cool because of this, or a hotel that maybe...
I have lots of them, but yeah, I do have my special ones. Now, for different reasons, though.
Okay.
My favorite from just a historical, like anecdotal point of view is the Hotel Alexandria, downtown LA.
Mm-hmm.
I could not believe how many great stories that never were told about the building.
Mm-hmm.
Stories found in newspapers. And
because a lot of famous people stayed there.
Oh, yeah.
And it was
that
like...
was the Plymouth Rock for the motion picture industry when they were moving from the East Coast to the West. It was before Hollywood. That was the place that they went. That was Rome until 1920, or 21 really. It was Rome in 1920, but once the Ambassador Hotel opened up in 1921, which was actually built by the owners of the Alexandria. Most people don't even know that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so it was natural for the movie crowd to move from the Alexandria, which had gotten too small, to someplace a little bit larger, a little more privacy, as LA was beginning to move west from downtown.
That's where Kennedy was shot, right?
Ambassador.
At the Ambassador.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Alexandria is the hotel where the when they were building it, I think there was a guy who built like an extension to it who owned property next door, but never like there was
that story.
Yeah, there was like a property owner. Now it's sad. Like I have a friend who owns a pest control company, and they were contracted to do that. And he took a bunch of pictures.
The ghost wing.
I like architecture, and he was like, I was like, man, that place is awesome. Yeah, and it's so sad now because it's like.
Well, they use it a lot for film shoots.
That was the ballrooms, maybe, or just everywhere. Do they?
No, what ended up, to be real quick about it, when the hotel was originally built in 1906, while it was under construction, what the owners were doing at the time, there were two owners, where they were leasing the land in order to build the hotel on top of it. Well, one property owner started complaining that you're either too close or you're on my land, and so they made a deal. Okay, we will let you build your part of the wing and attach it to ours, and we'll have just one big happy building. So it was the William Chick family on 5th Street that agreed to do that. So every month or every quarter, the owners would get a check from the owners, the property owners would get a check from the Alexandria owners for the rent. Then as the economy shifted, the Alexandria started going down, Great Depression. By 1934, when it closed down, all of the individual parts of the building went back to the property owners that building was on.
That's funny.
So most of them go, I don't want this part of the building. You know, I want to just get rid of it all. So every one of them pulled together except one, and it was William Chick. Their family refused to join with the rest. So they sold the Alexandria, the ones that collected all together and did a combine. They sold it to a silent movie producer named Phil Goldstone, all except for that one section. And so Phil Goldstone wanted that one section. The Chick family would not sell. So he said, well, okay, if you're not going to sell, we both have some leased spaces, retail spaces. At least let's agree on what we're going to charge and charge the same thing, okay? So William Chick did not. He cut the price. And one of Goldstone's clients in the retail space moved to that William Chick thing. And so Goldstone freaked out. And when he found out that the addition that William Chick owned did not have stairs, did not have an elevator, what he did is he gave those tenants something like 24 to 48 hours to vacate because he was going to wall it up. And that's what he did. And I'm guessing that it was very short notice because a lot of things were left behind, like toiletries, suitcases, clothing, in some of these suites were just left behind or abandoned. And they sat there for, decade after decade, rotting. Its main, tenants for many years were pigeons, which came in through the broken windows and just, and rot had set in. There were a few daredevils that could climb, that figured out how to get in there. But it was really dangerous. And to this day, that building is still separate.
Wow.
Not part of the original. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when they watch American Horror Story hotels. Everyone talks about the Cecil. It's always the Cecil
Yeah.
based. But they don't realize that almost half of the storyline is also based on the Alexandria.
So now, have you been to hotels all across America, or have you been focused on Los Angeles, Southern California?
No, it would have been very expensive to do 16 in LA. They know how to get money from you.
Sure.
With permits and stuff. So I did focus on the Alexandria was the one I wanted to do. I actually turned down the Cecil at one point because I was not going to do a photo shoot that was going to romance serial killers. I just thought that was in bad taste. Also, it wasn't a historical landmark at the time that I was doing this book at the time. It didn't become a historical landmark until 2017. Plus, it was going to be almost impossible to investigate because of the noise from the street. So my shoots were 50% trying to get the photos, good photos, 50% have to do a paranormal investigation, a serious one. So it really, I couldn't tell you which was more important, the photo shoots, because it was pretty even. It was like 50-50.
And most hotels won't tell you if something happens in a room. They won't tell you. They don't
Some will, if they trust you.
If they
trust
trust, okay.
I'm gonna go to I'll be in Hollywood, Florida at the end of the month, and the Hard Rock hotel there in Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood area, is where Anna Nicole Smith overdosed, and they had to just get rid of that suite, knock it down, change the number, because everybody and their mother wants to stay there. Wants to stay in the suite where she, which is pretty dark, right?
Yeah.
But people are absolutely fascinated. I mean, they visit Jim Morrison's grave. They visit.
I think that happens too at the Beverly Hills, wherever Whitney Houston.
Oh yeah.
That happens there too a lot.
Well, there's the hotel where Janis Joplin died. I was there last year. A friend of mine. Woman named Holly Lindblom rented it and invited me, and when I visited it, it was lots of graffiti and people leaving their notes to Janice or leaving an offering in this room, and it was kind of interesting to see. But that's more of a healthy way of marketing it,
sure,
than some of these other ways of doing it.
I mean, it just seems like that, there's that old saying, I didn't choose the thug life chose me.
Yeah.
It seems like you didn't choose this paranormal chapter in your life. It almost found you.
That's exactly what I say. I actually do say that I don't think I never chose the paranormal. Sometimes it's a little embarrassing, really. I mean, I'd rather be doing something else, but it chose me. And so I actually, I start feeling sorry for the ghosts after a certain point in certain locations, just by the way they're exploited. And it's very hard for me to keep quiet sometimes when I see deliberate misinformation and deliberate bad behavior in order to make a buck. And it's not just on the part of the hotel. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's a part of fly-by-night paranormal teams that are just trying to make a name for themselves on TikTok or whatever, and YouTube.
It's a fascinating world, dude. There's Thanya calls them the TikTok witches, because they're out there doing all this weird
I
shit.
saw a YouTube video, I kid you not, where I won't name names. I should hold everyone responsible for bad behavior, but there were a couple of YouTubers that went into the Hollywood Roosevelt, and they claimed that they were in the Montgomery Cliff Suite, which is supposed to be haunted. Not once did they refer to him as Montgomery Clift. When they were doing their EVP sessions, they were going, "Cliff Montgomery, are you here? Cliff Montgomery, talk to us." And I thought, that is so disrespectful to do that, where you don't even know the name of or the history behind what you are attempting to do.
To get the views and the likes.
Yeah. And sadly enough, a lot of people will follow
that. Absolutely.
And believe it. And when you tell them otherwise, it's like, it's not Cliff Montgomery. I don't know. I seriously doubt Montgomery Clift is the ghost there in the first place, but I don't know. Maybe in a strange roundabout way, Cliff Montgomery and Montgomery Cliff are interchangeable because I don't think either one is the ghost. But still, if you're gonna act like you know Hollywood history, then you should at least try to get the names right.
Let's get the freaking name right. Now, prior to all the hauntings and the ghost encounters and all this, were you a man of faith? Were you religious? Did you practice a religion? Were you an atheist, a non-believer, or where did you stand as far as religion and spirituality?
That's a good question. I'll try to give you a more simple answer. I would say that I've always fluctuated between agnostic and I've never been atheist. But at the same time, I was raised Southern Baptist, and I'm definitely not Southern Baptist, So I renounced that one a long time ago. I don't believe in organized religion, to be honest with you. I believe in a spiritual side. I will say this, I became more spiritual through doing this project. It actually made me appreciate life more because I got to read about a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of ups and downs, not just of people, but of the buildings themselves. And it's really a miracle that some of these buildings survived with all the fires, with all the bad things that happened, mismanagement, sometimes bankruptcy, and yet they still stand, and you almost fall in love with the building itself. Every building has its own energy, and I will say every photo shoot that I did had its own personality altogether. Sometimes the cast brings it, but a lot of times it's the building itself. It's just the history. I believe it's really there.
Your book, please tell the listeners what the name of the book is where they can find it.
Oh, sure. It's called Haunted by History, Volume 1, Separating the Facts and Legends of 8 Historic Hotels and Inns in Southern California. And you can buy it. You can buy it on Amazon, but you can also buy it on my website, which is bizarrela.com. I have an Etsy shop. I have different things where I put it up for sale. Sometimes some sites are it's a little cheaper than others, but it's a 4-pound book. It's over 400 pages.
That's a lot of work.
Yes.
bizarrela.com is your website, and they can
And you're
get
doing
it there.
walking tours?
I am doing walking tours. The book actually got so successful that a lot of people started saying, I want to go into some of these places. And so during the pandemic, I was allowed to get into a couple of haunted hotels. And, but now that everyone's trying to get back to normal, those have been kind of diminished a little bit. I mean, I may be able to come back during a slow period or whatnot. But there are so many other buildings that just need to be addressed. And I don't want to be, just seen as an expert in the 8 hotels that are in my book. That it never ends.
It's a great starting point for sure.
Yeah. So I want to continue to learn. I try to learn something new every day about a location. Right now I had just met a woman who told me her stories about the Hollywood Outpost building, which is right across the street from the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Her ghost stories have me very piqued about that building. So I promised her, she's in a senior living home, and I promised her that I would just look into the history of that place. And I did find a few interesting things. I even found a death there, but I don't think it matches what her stories are. But it's very intriguing. I look forward to actually getting to know that building a little bit better too.
I'm gonna buy your book, and I'm gonna look for you and have you sign it for me and autograph it.
Thank you.
I love books. I'm fascinated by books, and I'm definitely gonna check it out, and it's gonna take me down. We were talking about and the reason I said rabbit holes is because I'm down a rabbit hole every single night. I am a rabbit hole. I dive into these freaking rabbit holes head first. And sometimes it's 3 a.m. and I'm texting Thanya. I know she's not going to get it because she's asleep.
Did you see this?
And but I'm fascinating by these type of stories. So I'm definitely going to check out your book. Once I read it, I'm probably going to have a million questions. I'd love to have you back here to follow up on some of those, to follow up on some of those, like I said, I'm going to read it. And hopefully you're available. We could come back and chat about some of the questions that I'll have about it, and maybe we'll invite some people in here to kind of listen and ask you some questions as well. I think that'd be a great episode. It'd be a little bit different from our norm, but I think you'd be a great person to pick your brain and just learn and absorb this, because I think even if somebody's a non-believer or a skeptic, the way that you're describing these things, it's not like you're trying to sell anything. It's not like you're trying to convince anybody of anything. It's coming across extremely genuine and intelligent. It's coming in a very logical way, not in and then the blah.
I think that there's no people love to run to people who are making a spectacle of themselves.
Yes,
and that's I really can't stand that. I can't deal with TikTok.
No.
Martin laughs because all I have my TikTok for is to argue with people. I'm like, why are you doing that? That's wrong. Why are you doing this? So I feel like when they come off and you're intelligent and you're researched and it's factual, because I think there's so many things that are not factual out there.
Too much.
And I think that it's sad because just with the factual things, it's so interesting, and LA is so diverse, and there's so many things. I've done walking tours. I've done a lot of walking tours because I'm into all that. And some of them I was like, what are we doing here? This is so lame. Why don't you just say that you don't know? Because on the walking tour, there'll be people who are really big on the history of LA. And I did another walking tour that took me to the one with the magic with Houdini.
The Magic Castle?
The Magic Castle. Took me to the Magic Castle. And I've been to the Magic Castle, inside, this one outside. And there was somebody on the tour with me who was researching the Magic Castle. And we started talking. And the person who was giving the tour was giving all wrong information. Yeah. And then the person who was next to me was like, this is crazy. Everything they're saying, that's not true. This is wrong. There had been a fire. The person didn't address the fire. There had been other things.
I sometimes anger people. A lot of... one of the big mistakes that I think I made early on was actually trying to think that the paranormal people,
community,
paranormal investigators or whatnot, were my audience. They're not. They're the ones that run. And literally, it's like turning, when I was in Dallas, I would flip on the light and the roaches used to just scurry and hide, Sometimes it's that way in the paranormal community. I walk into a room, lots of cancellations. Or people going out of their way to avoid me, but it really isn't them that I'm talking about. I'm there to help them. This information was designed to help anybody that has questions, and I'm not the big bad boogeyman, but at the same time, I am just trying to set the record straight for posterity, because I always say, this is my mantra, if the history is wrong, the ghost stories will never be right.
Correct.
And so we're miscategorizing, we're misnaming ghosts, we're completely off base. And so if you're going to consider yourself a serious paranormal investigator, you cannot keep going lightly on history, and you may go on and say you found this or found that, or you met a ghost that's related to Matthew McConaughey. that really happens. Stuff like that really happens. And I just I just kind of shake my head and go, you're really not advancing paranormal research at all by doing this. You're just calling attention to yourself. And the middle America is going to look at that and go, this whole thing is rotten. And again, I start feeling sorry for the ghosts.
Being exploited.
Because a lot of them probably do have a story to tell or want to, they're not going to sit right down and tell you, well, this happened to me in 1905. But they do sometimes provide clues. And, I can give you a real quick example. Aztec Hotel in Monrovia. Mm-hmm. Long rumors. And these are rumors. This isn't made up. Rumors going back many decades that a speakeasy took place in the basement. And it makes sense. I've looked into it. I think it's highly plausible that that might have happened. Not in the time frame that most people imagine, but maybe towards the end of Prohibition, probably. We didn't know for sure, but I ran some tests down there, and wouldn't you know it, one of the EVPs that we caught, EVPs being phantom voices, electronic voice phenomena is what it literally stands for, but it's a mystery voice that's not one of us, and it's a real deep male voice, and I couldn't make out what it said for the longest time, but then once I heard it, I could never unhear it. He said, 1 set of deuces. And I had to look that up. And that is a poker hand. I never played poker. None of the guys that were down there, we weren't poker players at all. But he goes, 1 set of deuces. And just like that. And deep voice. And that made me, that's like, these are little clues that maybe there really was.
Something down here, a speakeasy.
If not a speakeasy, card games.
Sure.
But the card games were part of the speakeasy legend.
Yeah.
So 1 set of deuces.
Set of deuces, that would be three twos? Because you got a pair, you got a set, and then you got poker.
I still don't. I think what we should do sometime is stage a poker game down
that'd be fun. And see who gets the 3 deuces.
Because what I do with the staging and bringing people in and period costumes and shooting, that's actually... It actually is a valid test called the theory of familiarity.
Oh, wow. So dude, that makes total sense. So that's like if you're dressing your model in the 20s, you're in this building, which was around in the 20s, then this person, all of a sudden, there's life in this place again. And now that familiarity is there. And then they're...
if you're assuming that ghosts have intelligence, you should be able to fool them or confuse them into coming forward. But you do it in a nice way. And one of the best ways to do that is to create an environment that they may recognize and get just a little bit...
Can you imagine, like 100 years from now, somebody's going to be setting up freaking rock concerts for the 80s, dead people?
You'd be surprised. You would be surprised how this has worked. It can work with audio, work visually. But yeah, we would, if you're spending 3-4 days, 24 hours around the clock doing this, and during a slow period of a hotel's time, I like hotels because they let you in, and that's how they make their money. It's not like a museum where it's like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, you have to go, kind of thing. We got to set the alarm. No, if you're at a hotel, you can literally camp out there and stay in the haunted rooms, and you monitor everything. I guarantee you, if you do this kind of theory of familiarity stuff, whether it be audio, visual, whatever. I'm not talking about the stupid dolls, with the batteries and stuff, unless there is a ghost child. I'm talking about staging something that's really relevant to the history of the place. Once you do that, then, after 3-4 days, you really do have a good idea as to whether or not this place lives up to its reputation of being haunted or not. You will have some sign, some clue.
So there's no doubt in your head that these hauntings are, there is no, like, you ever sit back and be like, am I freaking crazy? Or are you now 100% convinced?
I'm convinced it exists. I wished it didn't, because I would love to be able to just say, because I do enjoy tearing apart ghost legends, mind you. It is fun for me, because it's like, that makes, all I'm trying to do is put everything in a perspective that makes sense, because I'm not anti-ghost. It's just that I just think that we may be looking at everything through the wrong angle, through the wrong lens. And we need to, maybe do some revisionism, because a lot of stuff has been just, 50 years of ghost story collecting and spreading, and in some cases, the foundation of which these ghost legends are like sandcastles. They're unstable, and yet you keep seeing paranormal people who don't know this attempting to put layers of paint on a sandcastle, and it starts crumbling. And when it starts crumbling, they reinforce it with other things, and it's like, no, just let it crumble and let's start over again. This doesn't work. It's time to throw it out and let's see what's really there now. And sometimes you find out things that are really relevant to the hauntings, and you go, aha. Like, I don't know how much longer we can talk about this.
No, go ahead.
But this will come as a surprise to a lot of people. But I've done a deep dive history into the Hollywood Roosevelt.
Okay.
And I have determined that Marilyn Monroe never lived there.
Oh, wow.
And that she was barely at the Roosevelt at all. I think there's only twice.
So why the obsession with placing her
Well,
there?
I know why. Because if you do you start looking, the smoking gun is when the stories started to appear. And the stories started to appear in the early 90s, but if you backtrack to the last major remodel of the Hollywood Roosevelt, it opened just in time for the 100th year anniversary of Hollywood Boulevard. And so they brought out Jimmy Stewart, they brought out all these stars, and they put a new star for Natalie Wood out, everything. They created a time capsule where people put their memorabilia in, that they were going to bury somewhere on the Roosevelt. And it was a big to-do. It was put on by the Chamber of Commerce. But 2 months later, part 2 was, there was going to be at the Grauman Chinese Theater across the street, the first ever major Marilyn Monroe expo, where people were going to start bringing in their books, their T-shirts, memorabilia, maybe a few actual items that she had, but I got the impression that it was largely just memorabilia and books. That spilled over into the Roosevelt, and it just blew the 100-year centennial celebration away. More people were interested in the Marilyn Monroe, and you had a lot of charlatans coming in, as well as people claiming that they knew Marilyn. You had this one guy, I forgot his name, but he claimed for years that he was Marilyn's husband, one of his husbands, and he was there peddling his books, and so you had a lot of people doing that. And because it was such a big hit, they staged another one not long after that. So they had like almost 2 back-to-back. And then that's when the ghost stories started seeping through as a marketing angle to keep people going. But that Marilyn mirror, that was never Marilyn's. It was an original Cabana mirror. I found the inventory list.
So now you've literally researched all this.
Well, he's gone down to the inventory list.
Yeah,
I found the inventory.
Yeah, that's
list.
pretty
There were
detailed.
61, full-length mirrors in every Cabana, and this matches the description of what it is, of what it was. And Marilyn did a photo shoot in 1951. She was there for an event in 1952, and that's it. But if you use common sense, you would also come to the conclusion that Marilyn could never have lived there. And number one, lack of evidence of any photos besides her swimsuit photo shoot in 51. That was a tourist hotel, so she would have had no privacy whatsoever. And if you know anything about Marilyn Monroe, she didn't, she'll show up for things, but when she's not Marilyn, she wants to be private, and so she did find ways or look for ways to hide out and have her private time, she would never have had that at the Roosevelt. The Roosevelt in the 50s was overrun by agents, tourists, actor wannabes. The cabanas were right by the swimming pool, so that was always crowded. You would have had lots of paparazzi photos
Of her.
Even the photo that's in the thousands of dollar a night Marilyn Monroe suite, which they advertise as her living there, the picture of her over the bed, that was taken at the Bel Air Hotel.
Fucking assholes.
Martin's like, I'm never going there.
No. I mean, it's just because there probably is a Maryland ghost story somewhere to be told, but everybody's chasing this, this look over here type of a thing.
But this is the exact same thing. I was brought up with, my mom's a medium, and I was brought up with mediumship and stuff like that. And I feel like this is the exact same thing when I see mediums now, and I see all the fakes and all the show. Oh. I'm like, what is that? This is not what it is.
Oh, you go on YouTube and you'll find mediums channeling Marilyn Monroe.
They channel everybody. They'll channel Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you just have to click, and then you'll see like a bunch of people. I was reading into some of the things that you do before the podcast, and I ended up somehow on YouTube, and I not on anything from you, but from someone else who went into the Alexandria Hotel, and this person is like a podcaster. She knew nothing. She was like, this guy died. I think his name was Kenny. Like that. She was like, and this other guy died. He fell off of the scaffolding and died. They say he wasn't murdered. I think he was. And I'm like, how are you?
I have to check that out because I wonder if it's one of their employees.
I was like, how are you putting this stuff out there? Like, you don't know what's going on. And then she mentioned 3 people who had died. They were mostly like people who live there because I guess it's low income housing now. And so she was saying, I don't know if it's haunted, but it looks really shitty. I was like, what? I was like, this is crazy.
I don't think that's one of their employees.
I was like, this is crazy. And then if you go to another YouTube, they're talking about how beautiful the hotel is and da-da-da. But the first girl was like and she had over 1 million views.
Wow.
That girl who knew nothing.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this?
I haven't really tried YouTube, so I mean to try to make it on there, or haven't really tried on TikTok. I mean, I get told I need to do it. It's very hard to balance research and actually a social media presence, and that's why you have so many fraudsters doing that because they've got the time to make things up. They don't really care. They just have to be entertaining, and that's really what it is. A pretty face. An attitude and entertainment, and you can like really take off. And if you try to be real, I don't think real translates well oftentimes on TikTok and stuff. That's why so many of them end up having clay feet and they get outed, they get caught faking something, and then or they end up committing some felony and making the news that way. And but back to the Roosevelt, the other side. I mean, yes, okay, I'll get a lot of grief, telling people that Marilyn Monroe had nothing to do with the Roosevelt to speak of. But there's a ghost girl that's supposed to be 5 years old that people have been seen haunting. Now, there's really awful historian, psychic, who won't mention his name, but he's not with us anymore. But he came in after the Queen Mary, and he gave the child's name Carolyn. And so now everyone refers to this 5-year-old little girl as Carolyn. And I did find something related to this, and it was in the 50s. It wasn't a 5-year-old girl that died there, but the owner was a man named Tommy Hall.
Okay.
And he bought it in 1934, and he kept it until his death in like 1964. Okay. So his family lived in that hotel at one point. And in the 1950s, I'll be darned, he had a 5-year-old girl that died.
Oh, wow.
And so this little girl haunting the Roosevelt, they say that she calls out for her mommy. Well, I imagine her mommy was there quite a bit, but her grandmother was there and died, and her aunt was up there and she died. So two family members actually died in the Roosevelt Hotel of the whole family. And then you had this 5-year-old that didn't die there. She died in a children's hospital, but she had a rare disease that struck her down. So the coincidence of people seeing what they describe as a 5-year-old girl crying out for her mommy and playing in the lobby is eerie when you consider that there is a death that that backs that up. And I find that from time to time. And it's like, see, this is why you don't go with psychics who come up with crazy things and Caroline and put it out there. Now, I'm not saying that all psychics are bad. I'm not saying that at all. We all have psychic ability to some degree.
I agree.
Including me. And it's just that before we accept anything as fact, we should try to see if it is, in fact,
gotta vet it.
Fact. You know, I can say fact 5 times in one sentence if I want, but I guess. But you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Let's just say if there is documentation that supports it. If there's no documentation that supports it, then I think we need to set it aside, wait. Sometimes patience and some information will just pop up. I've had great synchronicity that way just in research because it was rabbit holes and dead ends. That's what I was constantly running into.
That's gotta be frustrating.
But every now and then you will have an absolute breakthrough, and it just sometimes you just have to wait for it to happen.
That must feel so satisfying when those floodgates open and you're just
It'd
like,
be like happy hour.
oh, wow.
It's almost the same level of like Dramamine and all these or other things, that chemicals, as seeing or having something happen in a room.
Yeah.
You get the same kind of
Rush.
adrenaline charge.
The endorphins that just explode.
When you find something that matches up, and then the ghost stories start making sense, and you feel like you're onto something. You're like narrowing down what may be haunting there. You know, you have suspects now, and they're not anything what you find online or what other people are saying, because they're just Wikipediaing it, and they're just not putting
effort.
They're just, they're getting their ghost stories over the water cooler.
Dude, Mr. Owens, Craig.
Dude.
I don't mean to disrespect by saying dude, but it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad I found you. Thank you. You're
and
awesome.
like I said, I'm going to check out your book. Would love to have you back because I'm sure I'm going to have a ton of questions after I read it. And would love to have you back, pick your brain. But again, thank you for shedding a different light on the whole paranormal thing. Everybody tries to sensationalize it. You've done a great job of making it a lot more palatable for the skeptics out there who are now probably willing to say, you know what, let me listen to this guy. He's not trying to blow smoke up my ass. He's not trying to sell me something or convince me of something. Everything you said today is very logical and very reasonable, and it sounds like you've done your due diligence looking it up, which is like, I lots of respect and admiration for you for doing that, because I talk to a lot of people and most people are just full of shit. And again, you do not come across that way. And I'm going to check out the book.
Thank you.
We will have you here again, hopefully. And thank you very much for your time. And keep on doing your thing, because it sounds like you're, once it's all said and done and the dust settles, everything that you document and write down is going to change that.
I think it's slowly having an impact. I mean, books versus TV. TV's the quick fix. YouTube's the quick fix. But if you really want to correct something, books help. But one thing I've learned: if you want to change the world, start with Wikipedia. So sometimes I go in and read Wikipedia.
He's like,
there was one time, it was right after that Netflix show came out on the Cecil Hotel. I was so tired of seeing them repeat some false information.
Oh, I was fascinated by it, by the way.
It's a good show, but there's some things that were wrong, So, so I went in there and just repeated, I corrected something. Like the date that it was built was not 1927. I've seen on shirts on Etsy. Cecil Hotel, established in 1927.
That's hilarious.
1924. It was 1924.
Probably got to make a fake shirt.
No
effort put into the shirts, huh? Just
and
whatever.
So I just changed Wikipedia from 1927 to the specific date when it opened, which is 1924, around Christmas time. And as soon as I hit save, I go on Facebook, and wouldn't you know it, on my news feed, someone had just posted the Cecil Hotel Wikipedia thing with my corrections on it. And I was like going, yes.
Well, there you go.
That's synchronicity.
Yeah.
That was like some validation that this is what I should be doing.
Well,
super interesting.
Awesome. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. Again, please drop your website for everybody listening.
BizarreLA.com.
BizarreLA.com. Thank you guys. Hit us with a rate and review. Share with your friends. Visit Ashe Imports. And anything else, Thanya?
I have a pop-up the 30th of this month, and that's it. Make sure you check out me out on Instagram.
Beautiful. Anything else you want to say, sir?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Stay blessed. Thoughts and prayers. And if you're going to believe something, go down a rabbit hole and don't just take some monkey's word for it. Do your due diligence and check out what the heck you're believing before you just put all your faith in it. Later.